We're here today with Patrice Gopo. Drawing on her experience as the child of Jamaican immigrants and born and raised in Anchorage, Alaska, Patrice enjoys exploring issues of race, immigration, and belonging. Her essays have appeared in a variety of publications, including Catapult, Charlotte Magazine, Creative Nonfiction, and Afar Magazine. Her essay, That Autumn, received a notable mention in the Best American Essays 2020 and earned a National City and Regional Magazine Association Award for Best Essay, Criticism, and Commentary. She is a Sustainable Arts Foundation awardee and a North Carolina Arts Council Artist Fellowship recipient. Her essay collection, All the Colors We Will See, was a Barnes & Noble Discover Great New Writers selection, and her debut picture book is called All the Places We Call Home. Patrice lives with her family in North Carolina, and you can learn more about her at patricegopo.com. So Patrice and I have collaborated multiple times. Patrice, is so wonderful for us to be able to get together again to discuss your new book.
Oh, thank you so much, Brian. It really is super fun to be here today. So thanks for having me back.
No, my pleasure. But I think maybe it would be helpful if you started off just telling folks a little bit more about your background than what I briefly touched on.
Yeah, absolutely. So I will just say, just as you said, I was born in Anchorage, Alaska. I am the child of Jamaican immigrants. So I have a really strong interest in telling stories, sharing stories that connect to identity formation, racial identity formation, immigration experiences, the search for a sense of belonging. All of those themes often weave very strongly into my work because of my background, I think because of my background, and including things like home and place, and all of that really shows up a lot in my work. But I did not start out as a writer. I originally studied engineering in college, and I worked, that's right. That's so cool. I worked as a chemical engineer for a couple years before I went to graduate school, where I got my MBA and my Master's of Public Policy because I was going to work with community development initiatives. I was really interested in micro-entrepreneurship. And while I did do some of that work briefly, it actually took me to South Africa, where I met the man I ended up marrying. And when I moved to South Africa, I was without a work permit, so I wasn't actually able to do the work that I had been trained to do. And it was in this time that I started writing. And I realized that I had these stories that were within me that I really wanted to tell in some form or fashion. And that was really the beginning of the writing journey. So I should just back up and say that I had always in some capacity written, typically in a journal. That was where I often wrote, but even sometimes during my travels in my early 20s, I would write these emails that I would send to people, which I guess in a way might be a precursor to what we think of as the newsletter now that people send. But I used to write these things and send. So I think writing was always something I enjoyed, but I never really thought of it as a thing that people do. And so it was really during this time where many of my options for what I was trained to do in my career were now taken away, that I turned towards this other area. And whereas historically, I had wanted to really work in these fields of justice related to things like micro-entrepreneurship and material poverty alleviation, I found writing to be another way in which you could engage with the work of justice. And by sharing stories and telling stories that perhaps we don't hear as much in, make as much space for in our current climate, I felt like that was a way to participate in these ongoing conversations about race and racial identity formation and immigration stories and all of that, which I feel are just very necessary conversations to have. So that was really how I got involved in writing and how I started writing stories. And I really began with writing the personal essay. That was my starting place, is that I started writing personal essays, and eventually those personal essays became this book, All the Colors We Will See. So this was my essay collection that came out in 2018. And it is really essays about my experience growing up as the Black American daughter of Jamaican immigrants, born and raised in Anchorage, Alaska, but growing up in a country that is so intent on classifying people and defining our experiences based on what we look like. And so just kind of making sense of all of that. So that's my writing journey, how I got into writing. The picture book took me by surprise. I didn't really see that one coming as a thing that I might end up doing. But after my essay collection came out in 2018, I remember in the summer of 2019, I was sitting with some friends and a friend was talking about her forthcoming picture book. And Brian, I had this moment where it was like a sacred whisper or something, where this idea that one of the essays in my essay collection could be a great springboard for a picture book. And I just thought, yeah, I could see that. This essay called Before in my essay collection, I think this could be a picture book manuscript. And at the time, I really didn't know a whole lot about picture books or picture book manuscripts or writing them. And that initial planting of that idea, it became the starting place for my own journey to learn about the category of picture books. Because yes, I'm a writer, but I didn't know about that particular area. And picture books are just their own unique entity. There's things to learn and know. And so that was, the next step for me was trying to understand, okay, now how do I take this story of this essay and create a picture book manuscript from that? So that's my background in writing, I guess in life, and how I'm at this place here with this picture book.
Isn't it so interesting and quite frankly bizarre, how either restrictions or opportunities can so dramatically change our lives unexpectedly?
Yes. I think you are absolutely right that happens. And I'm glad you said that, because actually I was just talking to someone yesterday and they were mentioning something that had come out of a restriction, I guess, in their life, that they weren't able to do something they had planned to. And because of that, it turned them in this entirely new direction. And I mean, not to say that always happens or, that's the only way life works to move us towards these paths. But I do sometimes wonder what happens when opportunities seem to close and what might actually be on the other side of that opportunity that we're just not even aware of or can't even fathom. Because honestly, Brian, if we go back to my college days when I was studying engineering, I think there was a part of me that thought, I don't know if you're going to stay in engineering. But I think what is clear is I had no thought that I was going to become a writer.
Well, it was similar. I was an electrical engineer. I worked at Bell Labs and I went back to school to get an MBA just like you. Now, I stayed in that trajectory a lot longer.
Right.
But I sure never predicted that I was going to be doing things like live for publishing color. I mean, this wasn't even on my radar screen at all.
Right. And see what's happened here. I think that's incredible. And I love hearing that too, because, and I know this is a little off topic, we're really talking about the book and everything, but I do think there's something about us as humans just having an openness to what could happen, and recognizing that I think whoever we are, we're bringing that person to whatever we may do next. So when I look back and I see the common threads in my past, what I see is someone who was very creative, interested in exploring ideas, cared about work that might impact the world, in some fashion. I mean, not to say like it has to be huge, but, in some little way that to think about that. And so I can see that consistency across my various experiences. And so I think that's something that can be really neat for us as we are moving from one thing to the next.
So I have to ask you about another parallel who happens to be, a really good mutual friend of us both, Kathy Izzard.
Yes.
Right. So she first wrote a adult book and then wrote a picture book. I mean, did you consult with her a little bit about all of this?
So what I want to say, I'm glad you mentioned, because Kathy was the person who I was speaking to when she was talking about her picture book. And that was we were having a conversation. There was another friend in the room. And yeah, when I was sharing that story, I thought, oh, you know what? Brian knows Kathy. I should have said her name. And so, yes.
Yeah. Not surprised, Yeah.
So who we had talked, she was there, and so that's a fun part of the story.
Yeah, really. So let's talk about All the Places We Call Home, your new children's book. Kind of tell us about what was on that essay, or that brought you to write a children's book about.
Yeah, absolutely. So the essay is called Before. And what happens in the essay is that there is a moment where I am placing my daughter down for a nap on her great-grandmother's bed in rural Zimbabwe. And at this time, I remember a nap I took as a child on my grandmother's bed in rural Jamaica. And so there's these kind of parallel things happening. And I'm recognizing in this essay, I'm recognizing kind of this sense of searching, wandering, various emotions like that I have experienced that in many ways I imagine my own child will experience because there are parallels to our stories. So that's what the essay before is about. And I thought, yeah, I think there's something here with this movement from a child, taking a nap on her great-grandmother's bed, her mother taking a nap on her grandmother's bed, these different countries being connected to a child's story. And so that really is what became the starting place for me to write this picture book. But Brian, as I said, I didn't know anything about picture books. I didn't really understand how they worked, but I thought, okay, well, let me give this a try. And I wrote what I'm not even sure was a first draft. Let's just say it was a terrible draft, because I just took the essay and tried to make a few changes to it. And then I thought, okay, I have this picture book manuscript now. And
little did you know, right?
Yeah, right. Little did I know. My agent, she read this manuscript, and she's so sweet and so kind, but she wrote me this note and she said, I just want you to try and think, can you imagine a child snuggling up with their parent and reading this story? And I thought, no, I really can't, right? The way it's written right now.
Probably just the sheer number of words, right? I mean, that's one of the big constraints in picture books.
It is the word, certainly. I think so. So in this case, it was a little easier because this essay was a flash essay. So it was actually, I think it's only about 780 words. So it wasn't that it was too long, but what I think was that the essay, it relied a lot on metaphor and kind of really heightened imagery and just some much more abstract concepts that we're serving the essay beautifully. It serves the essay beautifully. It's still one of my favorite essays to read at readings and things like that. But in terms of making it a story for a child, there was a lot that needed to shift and change. And so I think for me, what I had lost sight of was it was a starting place for a picture book manuscript, but it wasn't such that I just needed to revise it to make it a picture book manuscript. And so after that feedback from my agent, I went about becoming an apprentice of picture books and learning as much as I could about picture books. I had read plenty of them up until that point because I have not daughters, but children. I mean, I do have daughters, but I think anyone with children is reading picture books. And so, so I've read plenty of picture books, and so I do enjoy them quite a bit, but I think there was a sense of needing to understand how they work, how they function, what makes them unique as a particular art form. And so I started to take classes. I started to attend webinars. I started to read books about writing picture books. I joined critique groups. These were some of the different actions that I took to develop as a picture book author. And I feel thankful for my background as an essayist because when I started taking those steps, I was actually able to look back on my writing journey and I thought, oh, right. I remember this stage of really taking in all I could to learn about essays and, joining the critique groups, attending the workshops, probably less webinars at the time, reading the books, the craft books, all of that kind of stuff. So I felt as though I had an example of that in my past writing history to fall back on to understand what I could do to grow in this area. And so once I did that, then I was able to start again. And so it became less about trying to revise an essay into a picture book and actually beginning from nothing and having the idea be there, but trying to figure out, well, what is the actual story here that I'm telling? So the essay was much less of a story and more like a captured moment in time of kind of deep reflection that was happening. And I needed to somehow think, well, what would the story be? And to recognize this is now a work of fiction. So it doesn't have to exactly follow what happened in actual life, because I am now creating something. So those things really helped me in my journey to make a story from this essay.
Well, good for you for realizing that you needed to study and learn the art, right? Because, I mean, there's a lot of folks that think, oh, just children's books is easy, you know, no big deal. And it's like everyone I talk to that writes children's books says, nah, no.
Right.
It's much more difficult than what people think.
Yes, absolutely. It is. And I think people, because the word count is low, it can often seem deceptively easy, but there's so much that goes into making a satisfying picture book.
So what were some of your favorite aspects of the book?
Well, I'll just say the illustrations. I love the illustrations, and I cannot take any credit for that. That's the illustrator, Janine Muhammad, did that. And those, something that I think is particularly unique and beautiful about a picture book is that, especially when there's an author and an illustrator, a separate author and illustrator, is that there is this sense of two artists bringing what they have to this project, and the project becoming something so much more than, you know, you could have imagined. And that's how I feel when I look at the illustrations in this book, is that Janine was able to take these words and make them more than I could have even dreamed of. So I think that's a really neat aspect. I'll just even show you, I'm going to show you the final page of this book, because I think it's just, it captures so, I know, right? So beautifully all that is happening in the story, and just that swirling effect, kind of that feeling of continuation that she brings to the art. So there's that aspect. But I think for me also, when I think about the text, so the part that I worked on, and what I think of as my favorite parts of it, it's in the story, what I ended up doing was this little girl, every night before she goes to bed, she spins a globe, and then she touches these different countries that are part of her family's story. And then her mother will tell her of memories from each of those places. So this is kind of their routine that happens each night. And I just love how all of this together brings that sense that a child can be deeply connected to more than just the place where they fall asleep at night. We often, I think, limit the ways in which we think of the concept home and to just, you know, one place. And actually, I think for so many children, they are connected to different parts of, you know, a country, different parts of the world, just different places that feel important to them. And I think what happens within this story is we affirm that that is real and true and a beautiful part of a child's life, to have these multiple connection points to places maybe they've lived before in the past, or places their family lives, but they've never lived, that these places can still matter to them.
Well, you've got such an interesting circumstance in that regard, right? Because of either having lived in or closely affiliated with Alaska, Jamaica, South Africa, right?
I know, right?
Radically different geographies, weather, culture, ethnicity, you name it, right? So, I mean, I think any person's exposure to such different cultures like that is, for one thing, incredibly valuable, and gives a person perspective that you really can't get unless you are embedded, you know, in some of these different areas. So I think that's really important, you know, for a person to bring to the table as a writer, whether it's children or adults.
Yeah, no, I thank you for saying that. I appreciate that. Yes, I think so. And that, I think, goes back to one of those earlier comments I was making about how, for me, entering the space of writing was an extension of this person, myself, who cared about justice in the world, because I feel very strongly that an abundance of stories in the world can help us see different things that other people are experiencing and also affirm things that we are experiencing ourselves. So I feel like this story for some is going to be a deep affirmation of their own experience. And then for others is a window into something new and so I think that that is just really beautiful and important work that happens. And I'm just delighted to be able to not just do that with my essays that target adults, but also to be able to bring that to work that is for children.
So let's go back to Illustrator for a moment. Typically the case I understand from folks is that the publishing house chooses the illustrator, not the author. Right. And sometimes they talk to each other a little bit and sometimes they don't at all. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. What kind of situation was that in your case?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. So yes, that is my typical understanding too, is that the publishing house chooses the illustrator. I think some people I've heard are more collaborative. There's more that is happening. But honestly, in my situation, there really wasn't a lot of collaboration of any sort. There were a couple of questions that I was asked regarding the illustrations, just kind of what did I have in mind here, things of that nature. But really, it is much more you've released your manuscript and you are trusting that this illustrator can imagine things that me as an author, I'm unable to imagine. And I think that is one of the powerful things about this type of co-creation, I would say, that's happening, because it really, collaboration would not be the right word for this, that I have written this thing, I wrote this thing, and now the illustrator takes it and makes of it something more. So that's how it happened for me. I think other people have different experiences, certainly, but I feel very grateful for my experience. I think something that I think is true is when I read through my manuscript, I recognized that the thing that I brought to this story was the way I could tell the story with the words. Like, that is my gift, is to write the words. And so the next space is the illustrator exercising her gift, which is to create the images for these words.
Cool. So what would you say would be like the one thing that you'd like readers to take away from the book?
So, okay, I'm going to say two things because I think I said one of them a little bit already, but just that idea that children can be connected to more than the place where they fall asleep at night, and that we can share stories about these places and they become part of us. So that would be one thing. And then the second thing is just making room and space for the fact that we are complicated people, that we have multiple components that contribute to who we are, and that we can care about and honor those multiple components. So that's probably maybe not as overt in the story, but it's still, for me, very important to the story. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I'm sorry if you just heard the doorbell, by the way.
No problem. So looking forward, I know you're just in the midst of releasing this book, but are there any future projects that you're able to talk about at this point?
Yeah, I mean, I can talk. So I am working on another essay collection. So I'll continue to write essays. So that's very exciting. And I continue to write picture book manuscripts too. So my hope is that this will not be my last picture book. This is just my first picture book. So yeah,
good.
Continuing to write in different areas and just embracing the reality that we can tell stories in multiple different ways. I think that's something that this experience of taking this essay and using it as a starting place for a picture book has shown me, is that as writers, we are able to write in different categories, that we don't have to just stay within the one place that we started.
Good. Well, Patrice, it's just so wonderful to watch your writing career grow and progress in such wonderful ways. So,
thank you.
Thank you for sharing that with us. And please keep us posted on, whatever comes next. Again, the title of her new book is All the Places We Call Home. Sure. And here's the cover. It's beautiful.
Yeah, I love it. It is gorgeous.
And you can learn more about Patrice and all of her work at patricegopo.com. So thanks so much again for joining us.
Oh, well, thanks, Brian. This has been a lot of fun. I appreciate the questions and everything, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
You too.
Thank you.